Hi, everyone. My name's Laura and I'm from Freedom for Animals. I'm the campaigns manager. Today, I'm going to talk about our work against zoos and circuses and how we need your help to bring their suffering back into focus. Before I get into it, though, let's just take a moment to dwell on something. Do you ever think about the elephant that you saw when you were a child at the zoo? How sobering is it to think that elephant is probably still there now? You've moved on and progressed in your life, but they haven't ever left the four walls that they're trapped in. This is the terrible reality that inspires all of the work that we do, and we want it to inspire you to take action too. So, who are we? Freedom for Animals was founded as the Captive Animals Protection Society, often known as CAPS. We're an animal rights charity that's been fighting against the use of animals in circuses, zoos and aquariums and mobile zoos since 1957, when a lady called Irene Heaton, pictured there, started holding outreach stalls with her friends and set up the charity that we know today. We carry out undercover investigations, support public protests, and change public opinion on how animals are used in these areas to in turn change laws. Our ultimate goal is simple, really. We want animal freedom, and we're not going to stop until we get it, just like you. So you're probably thinking, why am I talking to animal rights activists about circuses and zoos? So I'm going to take you through some of the issues of zoos before moving on to circuses. But maybe you're already thinking, but I would never visit one, or I haven't for many years. Or maybe you're thinking, are all zoos bad? What about the ones that say they're rescuing animals or are more local? Over the years, I've heard many arguments for why zoos may be worthwhile places. Mostly from non-vegans, obviously, but also from vegans at vegan fairs, surprisingly. This has always been surprising because if we're aware of the propaganda spouted from other animal industries like animal agriculture and the grass-fed or organic rhetoric, why do some people readily believe zoos' well-marketed conservation claims? So, to play devil's advocate, here are some of the other common reasons people may give for why zoos are a positive thing. So, conservation, my local zoo rescues animals, education, animal welfare, UK law protects animals, rehabilitation of animals, and protecting wild species. But realistically, all of these arguments fail to consider the life of the individual behind the cage or the glass and what lifelong imprisonment does to their mental or physical health. So there are over 500 zoos in the UK holding thousands of animals captive, their lives viewed as property or stock. So we often call it the conservation smokescreen because that's the argument that's portrayed the most by zoos. But obviously when we look behind that, the reality is all of these issues here. So zoos hold animals captive for their entire lives. Animals are kept in cages that cannot possibly copy their wild homes. They break up families by trading and swapping animals with other zoos. They perform invasive procedures to force animals to breed. They kill healthy animals if they are deemed no longer useful. It's estimated that up to 10,000 healthy animals are deliberately killed in European zoos every year. And they tether and manipulate animals to force them to perform. So I'd like to take you through a journey now, some case studies of animals who have been held in zoos and the individuality of them and what they've endured. So the first case is from an ex-zookeeper who recently shared his personal experiences with us in an anonymous blog. He was a zookeeper and a gorilla keeper specifically for a number of years before going vegan while working at the zoo. He recounts a traumatic memory he has of being there when they sent the female gorillas in one female gorilla in the family troop to another European zoo as part of a breeding program. So he says, when the day came to move her, her partner, the silverback, was banging as hard as he could on the door, pan-hooting in fear and distress, desperately trying to be reunited with her. Little did she know that she would never see her partner again, or her son, sisters, mother, brother, nieces, or nephews. Their bond ripped apart for profit. At the new zoo, she was a mess. She was visibly and audibly broken. She pan-hooted constantly in stress. She wouldn't eat. She was not comforted by my presence at all. And who can blame her? All she wanted to do was go back home to the family she had built and loved so dearly for decades. Back in the UK, for weeks after the separation, her son cried. He screamed for his mother, but she was thousands of miles away, screaming for him. To this day, this is by far the most traumatic thing I've ever experienced. I have so much guilt about it still, and it causes me so much pain knowing that I was partly responsible for it. Yet this is not an isolated case, and it happens all the time in zoos. So another case study now is of an elephant called Chai, and that's her pictured there with her baby. So she was an elephant who sadly died in Oklahoma City Zoo in 2016. Her story is a devastating example of the desperate measures that zoos will take to force elephants to breed. So some of the exploitation and torture she went through was that she was trained for 2 years to break her into succumbing to the very invasive procedure of forced artificial insemination. The process required her to be anchored by her feet and have a 3-foot hose inserted into her reproductive tract. She was forcibly inseminated 112 times in her lifetime, but it remained unsuccessful. She was moved to another zoo to breed with other elephants, even though it was experiencing an outbreak of elephant herpes. Chai was injured by the other elephants at this new zoo and lost about 1,300 pounds in a year, but then she was sent back to the original zoo pregnant, and her calf, Hansa, sadly died from the herpes virus at 7 years old. So as vegans, we rightly discuss all the ways that animals are used in the agricultural industry and how it exploits mothers and their reproductive organs and the trauma that that causes. So what about in zoos, where the same terrible exploitation occurs, but it is instead hidden under the guise of conservation? So 2 other elephants here, Five and Sutton. They were held at West Midlands Safari Park, and sadly, Five, the mother, suffered very, very similar conditions to Chai. So the utter emotional and physical abuse Chai suffered is quite clearly unbearable. But last year, elephants Five and her baby Sutton, who were living at West Midlands, were separated when Sutton was moved to another zoo to live with 2 male elephants who had previously killed their cage mates. So obviously to elephants, we know that their family is everything. The utter turmoil and sadness caused by zoos breaking them up is devastating, but sadly commonplace. This is something, again, we talk about a lot in animal agriculture. How cows and their babies being separated is so traumatic and awful, but why is it any different here? Also, like Chai, Five has been kept in solitary confinement for most of her life. She was used as a baby machine, forcibly inseminated with wild bull semen to have the baby, a baby who was then stolen from her to fund other zoos, leaving her alone yet again and trapped without her child. Now, Five is still on her own at West Midlands Safari Park. There has been talk of them moving another male elephant in to breed again, but she is currently on her own. So the main marketing tactic zoos and aquariums use to gain public support is to push the conservation argument, which I'm sure you've all heard quite a lot. But when you look behind the facade, what's the truth? So in reality, these are the figures. So most animals in zoos and aquariums are not endangered or even threatened in the wild. In fact, 95% of species held in zoos are not endangered in the wild, and 92% of fish species in aquariums are not endangered in the wild. So why are they there? We've got to ask, since zoos have been around since the 1800s, species have continued to decline in the wild. So we ask, what is the point? How can they justify the prolonged torture of captivity? The suffering animals experience in zoos is obviously not always visible to humans, or we simply choose to ignore it. Animals are not always injured, screaming, bleeding, or dying in view of the public. So it's harder to get across to people exactly how much they suffer from imprisonment. Yet the reality is that animals are kept in cages for their entire lives, so that humans can see them for mere seconds. This is not for any other purpose than humans' own curiosities, and it's a frivolous waste of life. The vast majority will be born in zoos and die in zoos. So many animals are put on show to visitors that it becomes impossible to house them all. So they are killed to free up space for future baby animals to bring in the visitors, and the cycle repeats itself again and again. So I mentioned it before, but zoos kill around 10,000 healthy animals a year, and the fact isn't hidden. And in fact, EASA's own zoo guide outwardly talks about this form of population management. But in aquariums, which are underwater zoos, the situation is sadly as dire. Sorry, it's very negative at the start. They again claim to help with conservation, yet the majority of fishes held in their tanks are not threatened in the wild, and many were even stolen from their wild homes. This not only causes extreme stress and trauma to the individual, but the devastating capture methods destroy wild habitats and kill coral reefs. How can aquariums claim any conservation benefit when they are literally decimating wild populations and natural environments? Circuses is always prevalent in aquariums, and we've witnessed animals circling, self-mutilating, and banging themselves against glass in a desperate bid for freedom. So zoochosis is a stereotypy of captivity. They often pace, circle. There's many different forms of stereotypy that is in aquariums and zoos. I'm going to take you through a little montage now, which is sad, I'm afraid, but it's of investigation footage that we've taken about stereotypies to show how the mental torture of animals is shown in captivity. So you could see clearly there with the tigers and lions that they were pacing. That was actually taken at 2 Zoo Nights investigations, one at Zoo Nights London and one at Bristol Zoo Nights, both after hours festival events that allow the public to drink alcohol around them until 11 p.m. at night. And you can obviously see there Brenda the octopus banging against the glass as well. These are all captivity-related psychological and physical issues known as zoochosis. It's typical to see animals repetitively swaying and circling, head bobbing, pacing, obsessively eating their own feces and vomit, self-mutilating, all to cope with the stress and boredom of captivity. So here are some of the other ways birds, for example, are held captive. Zoos come up with terribly cruel ways to hold animals captive, especially birds. So I'm sure everyone can see what's wrong with the 2 birds in the top 2 pictures here. This is a term known as pinioning in the zoo world. It's a zoo term for mutilation, basically. And to be clear, this is not the same as wing clipping, which we often get asked about, whether it's the same. It's not. It's the 50% cut of a bird's wing to permanently stop them from ever flying again. So at a few days old, birds in zoos and wetland centres have over 1/2 of their wings amputated to permanently prevent flight. It's such a brutal practice, it's even banned on birds and farms. Yet this is still standard practice in the zoo industry. Birds are being deliberately mutilated so that they can be put on display with no need for large enclosure, nettings or cages. And then tethering, which you saw in the video a little bit, the horrible process of literally chaining animals up to keep them captive. Thousands of birds are being forced to endure this suffering, manipulated and starved alongside this to ensure they perform in public shows. Some are even kept in cages where they can't even stretch their wings. So another case study we have here is Cumbria Safari Zoo. And it's an example, a perfect example, sad perfect example of how UK law does not protect animals when it comes to zoos or any animals. So it's also known as South Lake Zoo, which some of you may have heard about, and it's a neglectful zoo that breached its licensing conditions continuously, even leading it to be dubbed Britain's worst zoo by the press when it was exposed that 486 animals died in 3 years there. We even sent an investigator undercover last year to see if anything had changed there, and sadly it remains the same despicable place to this day. The investigator witnessed a baby kangaroo dead in a pond, animals with stitches and broken limbs, animals escaping and dying in the snow, and many other devastating issues. So we must ask the question, regardless of reason or motive, why do humans think they have the right to view animals in any sense or to have any superiority over their lives? Caging animals against their will is exploitation, domination, and speciesist. So no amount of claimed conservation or education benefit can ever excuse it. It's a prime example of how these businesses keep failing animals over and over again and still remain open due to council's reluctance to act. They don't want to close them, even when they are no longer legal, as though it's their responsibility to rehome the animals. They also don't want to lose the only local tourist attraction in the area, so they dig their heels in while animals suffer. So that's basically what's been happening with Southgate Safaris. And you can see all the videos to that investigation on our website as well. There's 5 separate videos. So on to circuses now. So there's 5 animal circuses left in the UK. Our tireless campaigning helped to bring in the wild animals and circuses ban, which came into force in 2020. But sadly, that didn't stop some from continuing to exploit animals like horses, cats, llamas, goats, and birds. And dogs, sorry. These animals were wrongly left behind by the ban. And they need us to continue to speak up for them, just as we did for the tigers, lions, and elephants. But to do this, we need your help. So back in the day, I'm not sure if any of you were there yesterday for the Shack talk, but circuses were mentioned quite a lot as being in the main animal rights calendar for local groups who protest their local animal circus when they came to town. So since the ban, this focus seems to have fallen away in recent years slightly, and we want to bring it back to finally achieve justice for all animals used in them and who continue to be used in them. Some of the main tactics used to get the wild animals ban was to protest outside circuses, while also lobbying the local council and reaching out to landowners to apply pressure for them to ban animal circuses on their land. So we can obviously use these past successes to provide a blueprint for the future and continue that work to achieve a ban on all animals in circuses and even the closing down of zoos. So in reality, the animal entertainment industry is low-hanging fruit for the animal rights movement. A ban on all animals in circuses is 100% possible, and closing down your local zoo is possible. Public opinion is changing, but we can make it happen faster through the tactics that we use. So everyone knows in this room how hard it is to gain justice for animals in such a non-vegan world, and we all feel that hardship every single day. But if we focus our attention on these winnable campaigns, it could be a catalyst to the movement and the movement that we need to gain even more success in all areas of animal exploitation. It can fuel the fight. So what can you do to help? So it's important to remember that it can just take one person to inspire a movement. Remember Irene, who started Freedom for Animals. The best way to start is to pick a local target and start a pressure campaign. Again, if you were at that talk yesterday for pressure campaigns, that's a good place to start. By setting up protests, holding outreach stalls, and rallying public support for your cause. Yeah, there's some people in this room as well in that photo doing all the work. So, yeah, obviously talk about the individual animals there. We've mentioned like some individual animals who are going through the torture of zoos, and bringing their story into focus can be a really, really good way of inspiring people to take action. The statistical number we know, even with animals who are used on farms and in the animal agriculture industry, is so huge that focusing on the individual can really like gain empathy from the public onto your cause and their fight for freedom. And together we can win this fight. All the past achievements made in the fight against these industries has always been to activists like you, down to activists like you. Oops. Going ahead, sorry. So we have supported activists holding their own protests for many years. Many of you hold important actions already, which is what we noted before with the picture, against places like Sea Life London, who hold very regular protests outside there. So if you're in the area, please do join. And Cumbria Safari Zoo, which is in a very difficult area. So there's a really core local group who do work against that, but it's quite hard for them. They've only got 2 or 3 people that go a lot through, every day to gain support for that. But you can obviously target your own local zoo We're a small team at Freedom for Animals. So we know how vital the grassroots movement is to seeing change happen. An example of this is when Southport Zoo closed down after individual protests were held there each week by dedicated activists. It all goes to show that pressure campaigning works. And we're, of course, here to help by amplifying any events you organise and sending you the free campaign materials that you need to get going. So please take action for animals with us. So here are some of the campaigns that we work against. Zoos, aquariums, mobile zoos, animals in festive events and bird of prey centres. A lot of them have been mentioned in this talk today, but then there are some like mobile zoos and animals in festive events that are an area of animal exploitation that is growing steadily and we do need to get on top of because it's getting exponentially worse. Mobile zoos specifically. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming to listen to my talk. Thank you. I don't know if I've got time for questions, but if not. Oh, bless you. I was like, I've gone really fast. I wasn't expecting it to be that fast.
We've got some time for questions.
Okay. Perfect. If anyone's got any questions, feel free. Yeah, sure. Hi. Should I?
Yeah. I've got a mic here.
Oh, perfect.
Hi, thank you. That was really, really interesting.
Thank you.
Just with talks I've had with sort of colleagues and things, this is really helpful because it gives the information, the facts and things you need to have those conversations. But obviously, a lot of people have got children, and then around school holidays, what do we do with kids? Oh, great, we'll take them to the zoo or whatever. How do you tackle that in terms of outreach? Do you do anything with schools, or is it really sort of outreach outside of the zoos themselves, or is there any kind of connection with schools to try and get that message? I know schools, we always try and target schools, but is there anything that you do with that?
For some of our campaigns, like the mobile zoo, because that's a big growing issue with schools as well, hiring in these events. We do have a resource for that. We do need to get more educational resources for people with children for the school issue, because obviously sometimes it's taken out of the parents' hands. It's not them taking the kids to the zoo, but it's part of the, a visit as a group from a school, and then they have to take them out of that, so the children don't really understand why. But I think it's just so important to explain the reasons why to a child, like why you wouldn't take them to certain areas of exploitation with animals and why zoos should be any different. But obviously that's how they're raised, and it depends on the ethos of the parents. But I think just sharing the individual stories and the real facts about it behind the mask that zoos put out marketing wise, going beyond that and trying to get like reasoned information, like from our website, about why zoos aren't all there they say that they are, and like what's behind that, to kind of most children would not want to. I wish I'd been told when I was younger that going to the zoo was a terrible thing to do, because I'm sure a lot of us in this room got taken and now looking back wished that we'd known the truth back then. And I really feel it when I do investigations at zoos and aquariums now. I see a completely different side to it, and it always makes me really upset to know that I was part of that back when I was a child. So
when I think back to when I did go to visit a zoo or an aquarium, it always felt wrong. But I didn't know, as a child, you don't always understand that. So I think there's something in there that a lot of people probably don't feel like it's right. So it's just having those conversations.
And I think there's an education mask as well as a conservation mask. Like, that when you go around a zoo now, I'm really aware of it. Like the infographics they have for animals are really poor. Like they don't educate children at all about where animals are coming from, the habitats they would live in, how they would act in the wild, or how they would go about their day in the wild. There's none of that. It's very surface level, and you're seeing really sad animals, and I think children are aware of that. Like they can sense that, and they just find, like, some children, when you go there, you can see they're just really overexcited to be there, overstimulated, and they're not actually taking in who they're looking at basically and what that's contributing to. Thank you.
I just wanted to follow on from that. I think it's very similar to how I think a lot of us in this room probably weren't raised vegan, and that we weren't provided with the consent to like our parents didn't ask for our consent. They didn't wait for an age for like to the right of like an age of consent where we could like choose to eat meat if we wanted to. Like we didn't have that choice. It was forced upon us because it was the norm. And I think it's the same with zoos because it's like they don't wait to an age of consent where you can decide these decisions for yourself and evaluate what you're doing with your money. And I think definitely like maybe, I don't know, getting schools to collaborate with like animal sanctuaries or something, or getting them in, or because that would also raise awareness for animal sanctuaries because a lot of them don't have a lot of like outside the vegan movement, they don't have a lot of touch. So
for sure. And we do try and like promote alternatives as well, like to seeing animals in the wild in a very safe way, obviously not being part of like problematic like organizations that are too close to wildlife, but just in a safe, respectful way, just getting children used to being outside in nature and seeing animals in their rightful habitat and free basically, and promoting that ideal to them rather than promoting the idea that it's okay to use animals and to have that superiority over them, which could then factor into the other ways they use animals. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Good to see you again. Thank you so much for this presentation. Thanks. I had a question. What do we do when we are confronted with something like this in front of us? For example, I was in Edinburgh and I saw these massive hawks and owls that were tethered, tied down, had their wings clipped, just for a photo opportunity for some Harry Potter themed event. And I was getting very angry. And what would you have done? What is the best tactic in that moment? When we witness something like this immediately in front of us?
It's really, I had a similar scenario actually, and they were in 30-degree heat, like with no shade. And I remember specifically asking for where's their shade, where's their water, like asking those questions in front of paying public or people who just don't see it as a bad thing are really valuable because it just raises that awareness of, are these animals safe? Are they being cared for appropriately? Just raising those questions in front of them and just asking questions, how are these animals kept when they're home? Because they all basically tether them for pretty much their entire lives, and use food as like a tactic for them to perform. So there's all of those. I just think educating yourself on like all the different areas animals are used in entertainment, and then you will see these events pop up a lot because they are birds of prey centres, falconry shows, and mobile zoo events are becoming a bigger problem. So you do see them much more often. So just making yourself like as informed as you can be. And then, using that in your kind of like outreach, like asking conversational questions, but it's almost a form of outreach, just asking those questions in front of people. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Tim. Oh, question.
Hi.
Hello.
So I worked at Westminster Safari Park for a few years.
I think I remember talking to you once.
And Birmingham Nature Centre, which then they threw conservation in the title. Whatever.
They do that a lot now.
What's the best way to use mine? Because I got some stories to tell. So what's the best way for me to share them? Should I share them
I've
with
got
you
a card
or
here.
do online or what?
I've got a card. I'll give you my card, and if you can share them over to me and we can just have a chat and maybe a meeting together, that would be great. Okay. I did the ex-zookeeper who did the anonymous blog for us. It was a very similar scenario. I'd seen something on Instagram and reached out to them, and they were really happy to share their experiences because they just didn't feel like they'd had that platform to do that before, and also carried a lot of guilt about it because they were still not connected to the zoo, but the people that they worked with and everything, like taking that stance.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, I've got friends that were there. But,
exactly.
Well, not close friends, but like I'd love to protest out there.
See, local pressure campaign. You'd be perfect. If somebody said like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about," you'd be like, "Well, actually, yes, I do." Better than you. So I think that's really, really, really valuable. Like, we need more zookeepers to come forward, ex-zookeepers to come forward and share their experiences because, it's a massively hidden industry. Like animal ag, like all the ways animals are used, it's hidden in secrecy and marketing tactics.
I don't know, Westminster Safari Park, they had an outbreak years ago. I can't remember what it was specifically, but all the primates got a disease. And they killed them and they kept it quite quiet. And I actually was cleaning one day in the section I was responsible for, and I found a baboon skull with a bullet hole in its head.
So sad.
And I went and I was like, "What's this?" And they were like, "Yep, give us that in a drawer." Don't talk
Wow.
about it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Which goes
find
to
out
show
why.
you, even with the people who work there, like, and that's it's kind of like a rising tide of emotion. That zookeeper said, like, you know, there were so many things that he felt uncomfortable with, but it just like piled on top of one and the other. And he's like, I cannot be party to this anymore, because it's just, there's no excuse for it, even, you know, seeing it for what it is. So we need people to stand up and show that, even anonymously. Like, it has value still, giving like witness statements anonymously. So whatever way you would like to get involved with that,
Okay, cool.
we'd love to have you on
Count
board,
me in.
basically. Thank you so much. Okay. Sorry.
Apologies.
Sorry. We do have a stall upstairs, so please do come and chat to us, and we can talk more if any questions you have. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, sorry, just quickly, we also have a campaign, and a lot of the people have been working on it, and I nearly forgot because I didn't have a slide. Free the 15 sea life penguins. We've got petitions online. There's pressure campaigns in the local area, like fighting against it, and loads of dedicated people in this room have done that, and they need support. And yeah, if you can amplify that by sharing it all over socials, that would be brilliant. Thank you. Sea Life London, they hold 15 penguins in a windowless basement, basically. They have no sunlight, no fresh air. Yeah, and Sea Life do it across the board. They do it in other aquariums, but that's the main one. Yeah. Thank you so much.